All right, good evening, everybody. This is Jason, and I am here with the one and only Greg Armstrong. Um, I think Greg's resume is way too long to go through, but I think it's safe to say that, he has done a ton of stuff. 24-hour, national 24-hour team runner. He's ran Barkley, uh, Ball State up to this year. He owned that Ball State record until Bob Hearn decided to pull it out from underneath him. And he's done just about everything. He's ran SCAR. Like I said, before the interview started, I was running through. I was telling Greg, I'm like, your resume is just like it's like this. It's just like you've done everything, right? Haven't you?
Well, I guess I've been blessed to do quite a bit. I appreciate you having me on here, Jason.
Thank you, Greg. I really appreciate it because it truly is a pleasure. And so, before, I started the recording button, I told Greg, everybody's heard, a lot about Greg and his running experiences, but I really want to zero in on a few of the things that Greg has done and talk a little bit about what that looked like. And I think I would like to start with your 24-hour team experience, because let's face it, that truly is special. Very few people can say that they have gotten to represent the United States, in a fashion like you have at a national level. And first off, what does it take to make the 24-hour team? So for those who don't understand and know what that process looks like, what is the process of getting on the 24-hour national team?
Sure. Well, I was blessed to be on the team in 2015 and then again in 2019. I guess my evolution as an ultra runner, I had a significant change in my career, I guess you might say, around 2013. I did a race. It was Lisa Batchin Smith to put on a race. It was called the Teton 100. It was a point-to-point run from West Yellowstone in Montana down to Driggs, Idaho. And prior to that, I felt like maybe a decent runner. I've always loved trail running. That's probably my passion, because I love the outdoors and nature and all those things. And this was one of the first road races, and in that race, I think I started off, mid-pack, you might say, around the 50-mile marker. I moved up to fourth or fifth place, and I was running with Connie Gardner, just a legend in our sport, right? And we ran together. She was having some stomach issues. It just wasn't her day, but that was in the midst of her prime. She held quite a few records there for a while. And then I felt just super strong. Ended up running a negative split in the 100, and caught up to Grant. I can't pronounce his last name, but the Australian Grant Minogue, and then at the end, I caught up to Oswaldo Lopez, who at that time was like second in water, and these were like the last there at the end are just like running idols at the time for me, and I was just completely taken back by that race, and caught up to Oswaldo, and we ran step for step for the last 4 months, and I would try to pull ahead of him, and he would stay with me, and he'd try to pull ahead, and it came down to a 50-yard sprint in a 100-mile race. I mean, it was just incredible. I think he beat me by 9 seconds or 9 or 10 seconds or something like that, and I was just elated. I was like, this is the pinnacle. I never, I thought this is the best that I would ever have. And I was ready to just, stop ultra running at that point. I was so thrilled. The next day at the award ceremony, Connie Gardner came up to me, and she's like, Greg, you've got some great potential. You should consider running the 24-hour national championship. And I was like, okay. I was like, well, when is it? She's like, well, it's 2 weeks from today. And I was back, that was in the time where, I would do a 100-mile race and I'd take 3 or 4 months off and, gain 20 pounds. I just thought that's what you got to do. And I was
Right.
like, are you kidding me? I just ran 100 miles. She's like, oh, yeah, you have plenty of time to recover. I was like, there's no way, and I will say, and it was in answering your question, I know that's a long way around answering the question, but what initially sparked me qualifying for the team is somebody like Connie Gardner believing in me and thinking that I had that potential. It's, that's not something that I thought I had in myself. And I think that's just a huge component of this sport. We all know that a lot of it's mental, but when she said you have potential to do really well at the 24-hour race, I kind of started believing in it myself. And so, when Connie Gardner tells you to sign up for a race, you do that. And so I signed up for a race in Oklahoma, ended up just not knowing what I was doing. But I started pretty conservative, ended up second place to John Cash. It's like maybe 139 miles, something like that. And Howard, the U.S. coach, Howard was there, and he kind of recognized again, and he kind of encouraged me to keep at it. I qualified for the team, and I think I had to run the next year and a half. It took 8. I think I'm right. 8 24-hour races. The goal each time was to qualify for the team. I believe at that time the qualifying, you had to run at least 140 miles maybe as a male. But it's the top 6. They take the top 6 women, and I qualified in 2015 as the number 6 male with 145 miles. So I think I barely made the team that year. And then in 2019, I qualified. That was probably just maybe one of my proudest races. That was the Desert Solstice. And at that point, the qualifying, I think the 6th spot was around 152 miles. So I knew it was going to take, more than the 145 than it did a couple of years earlier. And Nick Curry, who just broke the U.S. record with a phenomenal performance, Desert Solstice. Hats off to him. I'll throw a little plug to Nick. Nick has incredible talent, obviously. He has been able to win a lot of races, but the 24-hour race is unique in a sense. There's been a lot of 100-milers and a lot of fast Kers, and they can't make that transition to the 24-hour simply because it's the time on your feet. Some of these guys that are running, 11, 12-hour, 100-mile races, there's no sleep deprivation there, right? But when you have been running or moving your body for 19 and 20 hours, that there's just, it's just part of our physiology. That's challenging. And I've seen so many individuals. I've been on the track at Desert Solstice and a lot of these races where at 12 hours, I was literally, 15, 20 miles behind. And then by hour 18 or 19, those guys and some of the ladies they're done just because they can't handle that sleep deprivation. So I say all that to say this: Nick Curry has been a true student of the sport. And I think that is one of the significant factors of the 24-hour event. You really have to analyze every aspect of that event, but also your own body, your caloric intake, and what kind of pace can you withstand. And but that year in 2000, I qualified in December for the 2019 team in the Desert Solstice race 2018. And I was running with Bob Hearn. We were neck and neck, and I was watching Bob because he was right behind me. And, I had like 4 or 5 hours to go, and course, what's great about a track is you see everybody's race unfold. That's Camille Herron broke the woman's 24-hour record, so that was incredible to witness. But I was watching Bob, and I'm just, okay, as long as I can stay, a couple of miles ahead of Bob. And so I'm watching him. And then I think it was hour 22, I started noticing that Nick Curry he keeps lapping me. And I'm still doing like 9 minute and 15 second. Not like I'm a slouch, right? Still cruising along pretty good. And if you're running a sub 10-minute mile at the end of a 24-hour race, it's rare that you're getting lapped. So I remember stopping and looking at the screen. I literally stopped and I was looking at Nick, and I saw what his splits were. He was in like maybe the low 8-minute miles. And so I'm doing this math and I'm like, oh my, he could catch me. He was a few miles back. And of course, he's a local favorite because he's from Phoenix. And Jason, I tell you, it was the most epic battle it's one of the most epic battles I've ever witnessed. And it was just a true blessing to be a part of it. Right. And so by that point, the sun had come up, the race started at 8 a.m. So it's Sunday morning at 8 a.m. And the track is lined with, I'd say half the track is just lined with fans, people that had maybe dropped out of the race and gone back to the hotel to sleep. They came back because, not only was Camille breaking the record, I'm not saying they were all there to see me and Nick battle, but a lot of them were there to see Camille. But you had this just battle between two guys. And I've seen so many people pass out because you're redlining at the end of the 24-hour race. So I didn't want to start pushing it too far. So I told myself, I'm going to keep my plan, keep my pace until Nick is a half of a lap back. I mean, he just kept lapping me and lapping me and lapping me. And then when he was a half a lap back, I was just going to go as hard as I could and then just let the chips fall where they may. And it was 23 hours and 42 minutes. And I kept watching, and Nick was a half a lap back. And I kept my same pace. And I had a couple of friends there that were cheering for me. Most of them were cheering for Nick because he was a local. And one of them was like, Greg, you've got to go. He's going to catch you, and you're going to get bumped from the team. You're not going to make the, he's just like, things. And Jason, by the end of that race, Nick was running like sub 7-minute miles. He was running 6 something. I was in the low 7s, which I didn't even think that was possible. And I ran 155.10 miles. Nick ran 155.065. So they're literally like, it's like maybe 100 feet. So, I mean, it was just incredible. So I guess to answer your question, qualifying for that team it's definitely one of the highlights of my running career. For me, qualifying for it was, I had to become a student of the event. Number one, I had to really understand what I could pace and all of those things. But just so many phenomenal memories from that event.
So in that, because you're having to run so many of them from a volume standpoint, did you just, I guess, how did you, prepare yourself to because were the races close together, or were they spread out to where you had to hit them all to qualify?
Yeah. And that's kind of the challenge, because to qualify for that race, they don't consider heat, they don't consider, elevation, it's just mileage. So obviously, it's best for you to choose races like Desert Solstice, where the weather's predictable, a track's flat, and so, some of them were spread out. There were times that, I'm trying to balance that, am I fully recovered? It was, I would try to spread them out. I can't remember. I think the closest that I did two and maybe a month apart.
Wow.
But
That's that's amazing. And then I think, you know, you and I briefly talked about it on our way back from Scar when I crewed you guys. You know, what was it like competing like internationally when you got to go overseas and you know you're running with the Camille's and you know and you have all these people that you're basically you're basically on a team full of like elite athletes and you're running with these guys. I mean, you're like you're standing with these guys and you're like you're you're considered an elite athlete because you're with these people. You know, what was that like, competing with these guys and then running at the international level and seeing these international runners and representing the United States, like, was what was that like? Was that like, was it intimidating? Was it just another run? You know, what did that look like for you?
sure, it was just an incredible experience. Yeah, the 2015 was in Italy, and at that point, both of my daughters were still at home, so we were able to take a 10-day family vacation in Italy that ended with a national, a world championship 24-hour race. So not only did I have the race experience, but I was able to share that with my family. That the 24-hour race for me, I just made a post about this today. I spent the last couple of days with Harvey Lewis at around Frozen Head, checking out the Barkley course and all of that. And the ultimate gift of our sport, it's not the achievements, it's not the victories, it's not even making your own PRs, it's the relationships and the friendships that are forged, right? I mean,
Hmm.
ultra runners, I think by nature, 99.9% are just wonderful humans,
Right.
and so for me, the 24-hour race, not only getting to know members of my own team, the males and females, and just becoming friends and getting to know one another in that regard, but also making connections with a lot of our international athletes. I've made some dear friends, Johann Steen. I mean, we battled
Oh
it
yeah.
out at Ball State. And then, when I see him at the 24-hour world championship in Italy, I mean, it's just, I consider him a dear friend. And uh, so for me, that's probably the biggest takeaway from both of those events. 2015 and 2019. 2019 was in Albi, France. Are the friendships and relationships that you take away from that?
That's awesome. That's truly awesome. And I guess what we can do is we can probably, I guess, since you brought him up and you mentioned the Barkley course, we can just move a little bit onto that. Obviously, we're not going to get into the Barkley course, because obviously that's not what we're here to talk about. I'm more interested in, you know, preparation for something like that because you've done Barkley a few times, right? Or at least a couple times I know of. I can't keep up with all the times you've done it, but I know you've been there several times, right?
Twice,
And
yeah.
yeah, twice. So how do I understand how you prepare for the climbing and the toughness of all the vert that you have to do, right? But like, how do you prepare for orienting, like knowing where you're going, especially let's face it, the weather is always seems to be garbage for that course, right? It seems like it's always just not very good. There's always these specific races where the weather is always rough, right? And I always think of Black Toe is one of them, and then Barkley is the other one. It always seems like it rains or snows or something crazy is happening at those two races. But at Barkley, how did you prepare for like the tough part of like orienting and like figuring out where you needed to go to find this book or to move from here to there and what happens when you get lost and having to get course correct, like How did you prepare for that? What was that like being out there and getting turned around and whatnot?
Sure. For me, that was the fun part is the preparation, right? And I love maps. And again, my passion is hiking and backpacking and kind of that minimalist survival. So all of those components of Barkley just really appeal to my nature. I'm really comfortable in the woods, and at night by myself. None of that frightens me, or I'm not. That all of that just gets me excited. So I guess I think just a lot of research, in trying to put the puzzle together about what the course looks like. Of course, you don't know what the course exactly is going to be until 7 p.m. the night before the race, when he passes out the map and all that stuff. But just trying to put the puzzle together and find all those little details. That's the exciting part, the challenging part. As far as the navigation, I think that's probably one misconception of Barkley. It's not orienteering in its truest sense. You definitely need to know how to work a compass so that you can get a coordinate and make a general direction. But you're basically going to follow a coordinate or the navigation so that you get to the top of the mountain. And then when you get to the top of that mountain, you're depending upon instructions in order to find the book. I will say that part is extremely exasperating when you have spent 45 minutes to an hour looking for a book and you're in the right area. It's not that you're lost. It's not that your navigation was spot on. You came out exactly where you want to come out. You just can't differentiate instructions that talk about some oak tree that's bent over and 10 yards from there's a rock. I mean, when you're in the middle of a forest and you've got trying to figure out, the mind of Laz through those instructions is really challenging.
So do you think that that's what generally trips people up for the most part in this race, is like not really, not really being able to find the area as much as finding the area, but not really being able to lock in the specific locations of what they're looking for? Do you think that is generally what trips people up? And the reason why I ask that is there's a lot of people that you see there a lot, year in and year out, right? Like your Jamils, right? And generally you would think that after doing it a few times, even though he changes the course, there would be some familiarity with that and would have an edge of being able to be more successful. But it sounds like to me that even if you've been out there multiple times, based off of what you're saying, he may have it put in such a place that you may be in that area for 45 minutes and it could be laying right here beside you and you may not know it because you may be misreading, understanding where he's telling you it's at. Is that pretty fair to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think, and again, seems like Barkley, everybody's got all kind of opinions on everything. So I'll share my humble opinion. I think most people understand this, but I believe, again, it's just my opinion, I believe the race is exponentially harder than it was, a few years ago with the documentary. So, to answer your question, I think, what tripped people up 10 years ago were, a lot of those very things that you just mentioned, plus the difficulty of the course. I think what trips people up today is obviously what you mentioned, but just the sheer challenge. I believe that, that in my opinion, you have to be the full package to finish Barkley today. I think 10 years ago, if you had spot on navigation and you were just really deliberate and understanding, being able to read the instructions and find the books really well. Maybe you weren't the best climber, but you were, and I think there's examples of finishers, 7 or 8, 10 years ago, that they weren't the most exceptional athlete. They weren't winning hard rock and winning these mountain races, right? But they just were students of the event. They were able to pull off a finish. I think today it requires that. It requires you having spot on navigation and not spending any extra time finding the books, in the addition of being a phenomenal mountain climber and being able to just hammer the downhills and all of those things. And so, so I guess to answer your question, yes, I think that trips up a lot of people. But then also, I think right now you're setting at 68,000 feet of ascent and descent. If you finish the course, I mean, in 60 hours, that's an incredible amount of elevation change, on the body. So
yeah, that's tough. Wow, 68,000, right? Is that what you just said? 68,000?
I think so. I'm sure somebody will fact check me, or somewhere around in there. That was kind of my calculation.
That's crazy. So it's almost like what you're saying is, and you're not the first person I've heard that has said this, because I believe Ryan Pluckelman said it on one of his Adventure Jogger podcasts, where he said that you almost have to be what you just said. You have to be the total package now. That's what it's going to take to finish, because the course it's turned into such a hard event that somebody 5 or 6 years ago put on that same course in the same conditions may not have the same success as they had 5 or 6 years ago, due to the nature of what it looks like now. I think that's basically what you're saying, and what his assessment of it sounds pretty spot on.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you were out there training with Harvey. Obviously, Harvey, I think, is going out to run it. Yeah. He feeling pretty. What's his take on the Barkley course?
Well, I think that was his. That was his second time out there, I think. But I think his first time to really kind of get maybe a perspective of someone. I think that was the first time he was out there with a veteran. Of course, Harvey is, one of the most optimistic, not just runners that I know, but humans that I know, and that serves him well in his sport. We talked a lot while we were out there training about just how successful ultra runners have to be extremely optimistic and borderline idealistic, right? And
right.
Our thought process of what we think our bodies are capable of accomplishing. But yeah, I also think he's going into it with what I would say a humble confidence. He respects the challenges and understands, all of those challenges that we spoke of. And most people, I think realistically, I think a lot of runners, of course, everybody goes out there their first time with the mindset that, yeah, I can finish 5 laps. But they also realize that this may be a 2 or 3 year commitment. Maybe this first year, maybe you can get a fun run, and then, you learn so much more and you come back even more prepared. I've talked to quite a few, what I would say, contenders to be the next finisher. And I think most of them kind of relay that same sentiment, that this is not just a one and done. More than likely, it's not a one and done. I'm going to come out the first time and finish Barkley.
So what's the biggest, I guess for you, what is the biggest lesson that you have pulled from running that course? Like, what's the biggest lesson from that race that you've gotten out of it? Like, is it patience? Is it adaptability? What is it that you feel like you've learned the most from running that race?
If I had to sum it up, in the greatest lesson that Barkley taught me is pure, raw, 100% humility. I mean, that race will humble you. Especially the first year. I guess, and I'm certainly not one to make excuses. Doesn't really matter. I kind of regret both the times I did it. I went into it not 100% healthy. The first year I was on the wait list, the entire time, and so I had a water ministry trip to Africa for 10 days for Barkley, because it's like 2 weeks left before the race. I'm like second or third on the wait list. Nobody's dropping out, right? Most people from overseas are already made their travel plans.
Right.
It's unlikely that, and if you're on the wait list when you're a couple of weeks out. So I'd spent 10 days in Africa, and I trained some because there's a potential for me to be in the event. And I definitely become a student of it, because once you're on the wait list, more than likely going to get in. So I'd really studied the race, and I feel like I knew as much as I could about the course. Came back from, that's always exhausting. I came back, picked up something in Africa. I was sick for about a week, still just not really thinking I was going to get in. I get a call from Laz at 11, well, maybe 10:30, I don't know, 10:30, 11 p.m. the night before the event. And he was like, Greg, I know you weren't necessarily next on the wait list, but you're close enough. We had a guy from Spain that broke his ankle training today out on the Cumberland Trail. He calls it the candy ass trail. And he said, if you want a spot, if you can get here tomorrow. And I was like, well, let me call my principal. I'm a school teacher, and see if I can get off. And so I got in, 11 p.m. the night before. And so that first year was definitely humbling. And I'll never forget, I made it one lap, but I missed the cutoff for the second lap, I think by 6 or 7 minutes. But to be completely honest, I wasn't going back out anyhow. I didn't take enough food. I was dehydrated. I was borderline hypothermic. I mean, I was done. It was all I could get my ragged, broken body back to camp. But I'll never forget Laz and his cackle. It's really not a laugh. It's more of a cackle. And he's like, I bet you've never timed out of a race, have you, Armstrong? And, and I was like, so just the humility. And we need that, right? I mean, we need times in our life where we learn humility. And so Barkley's definitely been a giver of humility for me.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't mean to get off track, but I think I would be remiss not to mention it, because you just mentioned that you teach school. And what got you on the path of wanting to be a school teacher? Because if I remember correctly, your family's from Murfreesboro. They had a local business and whatnot, and I guess what decided you to move into teaching? And
yeah, my dad, when he got out of Vietnam, got a grant to go to college, went to MTSU, got out of college in 1969, 68, and bought a little automotive shop off the square in Murfreesboro, Southeastern Tire. Used to be on Front Street. Anybody that's from Murfreesboro, just a one car garage. In the 70s and 80s of the growth of Murfreesboro. I worked that business since I was 7 years old, and then took it over and ran that business for 10 years. But when my oldest daughter was born, I knew I wanted to do something that was maybe, in my opinion, maybe contributed to the world a little bit more than running a business. And I love Murfreesboro. Don't get me wrong; it's a great town to grow up in the 70s and 80s, but just the growth and our business was really successful, but it was challenging in a lot of ways. So that was when I made the transition to teaching, and it was so many hidden blessings in that. Definitely took a huge pay cut, but the time off gave me opportunities with my family. I don't think I would be able to pursue all the running adventures and even the ministry if it wasn't for being an educator. So it's been a blessing to our family.
Yeah, and that has to be rewarding, getting to work with kids and teaching kids. I was just interviewing Ryan Anderson the other day, and he was talking about coaching middle school track and how rewarding that was, getting to work with those young kids and helping them, helping them grow and learn and whatnot. And it was just a very rewarding experience for him. So I think that's really cool. So we've hit on Barkley, we've hit on your 24-hour. Another race that's near and dear to your heart. I remember we talked, it's funny because a lot of the things that you and I are talking about are things that we talked about on our trip back from SCAR, if I remember, because these are things that stood out to me that you seem really passionate about. And one thing that you talked a lot about was Vol State. And I know that Vol State is a race that really means a lot to you. And it's funny because you held that record for a minute, and then Bob Hearn, who saw that coming, right? He came in like a tornado this year and just torched that course. And I had the opportunity to interview Bob earlier after he ran that. And the guy is so humble. And, he talks about it, running it, and he makes it sound like it's just such an easy thing to do. And, you've ran it multiple times, and I mean, I don't know anybody that probably has, it seems like you have so much experience on that course. For you, what is the draw to Vol State? Is it just the length of it? Is it just the challenge? I mean, what is it?
Yeah, that's a phenomenal question. And honestly, Jason, I don't think I can find the words to really articulate and answer that question. You almost have to experience it. But I would say almost everyone that experiences Vol State, they come away with that same, just, if it's not the most scenic course. I mean, it's rural Tennessee. There's some beautiful parts through War Trace, the Strolling Gym course. You go up Mount Eagle, but it's not the scenery necessarily. In my opinion, it's long enough to where you're going to have some moments of just deep self-reflection and self-discovery. I think that's, if that makes sense. 24 hours, you're zoned in the entire time, and your mind is sharp for 20. You can keep your mind sharp for 24 hours most of the time, and it's just it's over fairly quick. But in Vol State, it's long enough to where you're going to have some incredible highs and then some incredible lows, but you also have enough time to come back to some incredible highs. And I think in many respects, it's kind of symbolic of life, right? Where you have these incredible highs of life, and you have these mediocre moments of life, and then you have some time in life where you feel like you're the roadkill armadillo on the side of the road that's up, and then all of a sudden you feel great again, and then everything in between. And that's what Ball State offers, is incredible highs, incredible lows, and then everything in between. And also for me, it's long enough to where you have those moments of self-discovery, but also short enough where some people are able to do it in a continuous effort, without significant breaks, and so, and just the idea of a point-to-point journey run, there's something that is really powerful about that, because you have this clear, you're trying to get to the rock, you're trying to make it to that point. It's a lot different a circuit of some type.
Right. And so with Ball State and with the strong performance that Bob had this year, what will it take to get under 3 days on that course?
Well, and I think it's certainly doable. I mean, I've said that from the beginning. I talked to Joe Fiji. He had the course record before I had it, and we both agree. 3 days is under 3 days is certainly doable. I think this past year, I ended up kind of tweaking my knee a little bit. I was on the course. It was, weather wasn't great, but it was definitely one of the cooler years that we've had, since I've done the race. I think that's one component, is weather. If you can get a little break in the weather, and just running having a really good race. I think 3 days is certainly doable. The math is there. It's not too far out of reach.
And it's almost going to be one of those style athletes that's more like a Bob Hearn, the Joe Fiji style, that it seems like you guys are built for this type of race based off of your experiences. All you guys, kind of all follow the same style of pedigree from the same point of this. It kind of builds to your strengths. And several of us were in a chat group talking about, what would it take to get under 3 days at Ball State? And I think you hit on a big component, which is the weather. I think the weather, you're right. I think the weather has to be spot on, because this Tennessee weather can be pretty rough.
Yeah. That's the year I broke. I'm trying to remember the year that I broke the crude record. For a while there was a crude record and the unaided and unaided record. Bob broke them both, so that's kind of a moot point now. But the year I broke Joe's crude record, we had a break in the weather the first day. Second day was not great. I did have some pretty, some hot days, but again, I was going for Joe's record, right? I wasn't going for 3 days. I was going for his record. And just like Bob was going for my record, I don't think Bob was necessarily shooting for 3 days. He may have been, you know what I'm saying? I mean, and so that's what records do, right? They raise. And now that Bob is so close to 3 days, I think anybody that, I'm going to go for the record. Well, you might as well go for 3 days. Right. I think you're going to fall relatively soon. It's the same, and I don't think there's a coincidence that, Harvey and I were talking about this, and I'm sure Nick could maybe tell us. I don't think it's a coincidence that Nick broke the American record a couple of months after, the world record was broken, in the 24-hour. Right. Because I raised the standard, like, okay, well, this, look, whenever they broke the 4-minute mile, they said it wasn't possible to break the 4-minute mile, but it wasn't, I don't know my exact history. It wasn't long after that, multiple people broke the 4-minute mile. Right. So I think it's that same thing. You just keep lowering that bar, and more people, they see that it's attainable and they believe that they can do it and they go after it. Right. So I guess the real question is, are you going back to get your record back? I mean, you got to get it back, Greg. Well, it's a fickle thing. I think it's one of those races you can't. It would be a fool's effort to do that race. Well, it'd be a fool's effort to do the race trying to break a record if you are not 100% physically or mentally. Knowing my own body and knowing my own mind, I've got to be 100% dialed in to go after that. And honestly, this year, I was not. I just wanted to be out there with Bob and kind of, I jumped in, I think a couple of days before and called Carl and I said, I want to make sure I'm not taking anybody's spot. He said, yeah, the wait list is gone. Yeah, you're welcome to jump in if you want to. But yeah, that this year taught me more than anything else. You're not going to do well at Ball State if you're not really dialed in physically and mentally, really prepared for it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. And I think for me, I don't know if I would ever do Ball State. I mean, but I would be more inclined to do like something like SCAR, because I enjoy the trail part of that. And I guess before we move on to some of the stuff you do away from running, you got to do SCAR. That was your first time running that. What was that like? I mean, were you familiar with any of that, or was it just one of those things where I know, you and Will just went out and you did it and you went sub 24 and, and I know it wasn't very easy. What was that experience like going through, going through all that?
Yeah. I'd love to do that again. That type of event really appeals to me. I think it's not my sweet spot in my wheelhouse as far as where I'm most talented, in running. And that's, we all wish, everybody wishes they were better in certain areas. I love trails. I love hiking. I love the Appalachian Trail. I'm just not, the greatest trail runner. But as far as the experience, I would much rather do something like that than probably just about anything. Just because it's, you're out there in the wildlife. I've done a little over half of the Appalachian Trail. I'm hoping to finish up the full trail the next couple of years. So I've done that stretch through from Davenport to Fontana. I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times hiking wise. That's the first time I did it in one continual effort, but that was a great experience.
Would you think going the opposite direction would be better the next time?
I don't think it would make a whole lot of difference, honestly. I don't know. I know people have debated it. I'd have to do it both ways to kind of determine that. I think both. If you look at my memory serves me, you probably know better than I do, but it looks like the topography and the elevation is relatively similar, going kind of both directions. But
it seems to be harder on the Fontana side once you get to Klingman's and past Klingman's. The back half I don't think is quite as bad as the first half is. So it seems like the hardest part of the course, and I could be wrong, is that part between Fontana and probably Newfound. And then after Newfound, it's not quite as bad. But that's just based off of what I've heard from people. I just had Luke on. And, all of it seems to be the same for Luke. So, he's out there doing cartwheels and breaking FKTs. So for him, it don't really matter, but anyway, I guess that, what really I think is special about what you do is not the running, is what you do away from the running and the community aspect of what you do for not just locally, but you talked about going to Africa, and I know a lot of people know this already, but you have Run for Water, right? And I remember coming back from SCAR, and you were talking about some of the things that you were doing, and I was blown away at some of these, at least some of the things that I didn't know that was happening at a local level, from the standpoint of people who don't have drinking water. Something that I don't take for granted anymore after that conversation with you. So, for those folks who aren't familiar with Run for Water, why don't you just give a little bit about that and about that, what that looks like, for those folks.
So yeah, I started Run for Water in 2010. As far as like an official organization, I've been doing some water ministry before that since around 2005. But and I take the mission of the organization is to raise awareness about the water crisis in our world and to provide solutions. Quite simply, it is a faith-based organization where we really try to help people in a lot of different ways and building those relationships. So sometimes we find ourselves doing things, beyond just water ministry, but water is kind of the tip of the spear. That's usually what brings us into relationship with a particular community, whether it's global or domestic. Currently, we're really active in Uganda and Tanzania and Haiti. Those are probably our three biggest global efforts right now. We're hoping to get back into Nicaragua. They've had some political unrest the last couple of years. That's one of my favorite places in the world. But as you mentioned, we travel to Appalachia on average once a month. I think 2021 we made 14 trips to Appalachia, to the poorest county in our state, and there's still children drinking from contaminated wells and children drinking from creeks and homes that just do not have any running water whatsoever. They have to carry water in their pickup truck or in their van in order to have water. There's folks with no indoor plumbing and taking, pan baths because they have no running water in their home. So I would say, as far as our time and energy, probably 60 to 70% of our time and energy focuses on domestic, water issues right here in our own state of Tennessee. It's 3.5 hours from where I'm sitting right now. You've got kids drinking from contaminated wells and families that, in order to have any water in their home, they have to fill it up in a gallon jugs and haul it into their house.
Right, because they don't have the means to go to Walmart and buy bottled water, right? Because if they don't have running water, then they obviously can't afford to go out and just buy water. And then, you brought up the point of, bathing and I think it's something that a lot of us, we really take for granted how for us, water is easy as going in the kitchen and turning a faucet on, and water comes out, and we drink it and we turn it off, and we don't think anything about it. But then you have these people like you're speaking of, that's in East Tennessee, that their children are having to drink contaminated water out of a creek that or and then in these third world countries where these folks are just in dire straits for water. And I guess my question is, how did you get involved, at like the and I guess maybe preface it by saying, what was the draw with the water? Like what made you think, what, this is a real crisis, this is a real issue, this needs to be addressed? Because it's not the first thing that in my mind I would think of would be people need water. I would think they would need food more than water. But then after talking to you, I was like, holy cow, this is huge, right?
Yeah, and it's really interesting to me how I came into that, and I have to actually give credit to my students. One day in my biology class, I teach freshman biology, and I was telling my freshman biology students about one of my experiences on the Appalachian Trail at Derrick Knob, right there on the SCAR course in 1990. They called it the Blizzard of '96. I was backpacking with a friend, and it snowed 5 feet of snow on Derek.
Oh my gosh.
And I had planned, that was my year I was graduating college from MTSU. I was going to hike the entire Appalachian Trail that summer. And so I was just doing some backpacking, testing my gear and those kind of things, backpacking trip. And we were stuck. We were stuck at Derek Knob for 3 days. It didn't get above, actually, no, we were stuck there for 5 days because of the snow. 3 of those days, it didn't get above 0 degrees. And I thought I was going to, I really thought that was going to be the end of my life, just because of the hypothermia, and, you know, you're stuck. You can't move in 5 feet of snow. So anyhow, I was telling that story, just that survival story, to my students. And I mentioned to them, and I ended up, the next day I got off the trail, I asked my girlfriend to marry me instead of hiking the Appalachian Trail. And we just celebrated 25 years of marriage. But so anyhow,
congratulations.
I was telling my students that, you know, that's one thing I'd always want to do, is hike the Appalachian Trail, because I decided not to hike the Appalachian Trail after that experience. And so these students came to me after class and like, Coach Armstrong, we want to hike the Appalachian Trail. That sounds really exciting. It's really cool the way you describe the trail. And I was like, I don't know, guys. And so I came home and talked to my wife. She's like, yeah, I think, you know, if you did like a couple of weeks out of each year, you know, y'all could hike the trail, or at least start doing sections of it. And so I told the guys, I was like, okay, but if we're going to do this, I want us to hike for a purpose, right? I want us to pick a cause. And so when we go out on the trail, we're thinking about, we're doing something not just for us, but we're raising money for some cause. And they had heard me talk about in biology class the water crisis. It's just part of my curriculum. Mm-hmm. And they're like, we want to hike for water. And so my students, their freshman year, this was back in 2008, 2007, maybe, they raised enough money to drill a well in Africa their freshman year. And we hiked, I think we were hiking 200 or 300 miles a year on the trail, trying to get as much done as we could while they were in high school. Their sophomore year, they came to me and they said, well, you know, Coach Armstrong, that was really cool for us to raise the money for, you know, the well, but we want to go and be a part of solving the water crisis. So when you're an educator and you have students that come to you saying, hey, we want you to provide us opportunities so that we can make the world a better place, that was a driving force in starting Run for Water and me getting into this water ministry. Was my students, their desire. You know, I shared with them a world problem, and because they had a heart of service, they wanted to, you know, be a part of that solution. And so that was just the groundwork of it. And initially, all Run for Water is we'd organize one event to try to raise enough money to do one water project in Honduras. And that's all it was for a year or two. And then God has just blessed it over the last decade, and it's just grown and grown to, you know, where we're, you know, active, you know, in multiple countries in the world and even in our own state.
So about how many wells do you think you guys do a year?
Well, I think the strength of Run for Water, because we're small and a grassroots organization, it's not a one size fits all. And I think that's some of the misconceptions. You know, and there's a lot of phenomenal organizations out there, you know, Verity Water, a lot of great organizations doing a lot of wonderful things, but because they're so large, they're just drilling wells. What we found in Africa is there's this huge gap of well repair. There's quite organizations that are drilling wells, but maybe it's because they don't have the infrastructure, or doesn't fit their organization. Very few organizations are going back to repair the broken wells. We average drilling a well in Africa maybe 2 or 3 times a year. I think we drilled a well in Tanzania. So we do drill wells throughout the year, but our main ministry, at least globally, is repairing broken wells. And I can a new well project in Tanzania. This last one came in around $8,000 to $9,000. which is great. I mean, it provided water for a Messiah village that their closest water source was 8 miles one way, and so
Wow.
so there's definitely a need there. But I can repair most wells for less than $500. And when a well is broken, it's not like that. Those children in that community can go to the next well. They have to go back to the swamp where they get typhoid fever. So I would say on an average trip to Africa, the most that we've ever repaired was 13 wells.
Wow.
So in Appalachia is probably more challenging. I know it maybe come to surprise people because every home is different. The needs of every single home in Appalachia is slightly different of what their water needs are. Whereas in Africa, it's really simple. I mean, they either need a well drilled or they need a well repaired. I mean, and that's it. I mean, and they're all hand pumps. It's the exact same system. So I've got a toolkit and I can go to Africa, and as long as I can get parts, I can repair the well. I mean, there's challenges, but it's very linear, very straightforward. Whereas in Appalachia, every single home is different. There's some homes that they have water, they need a water sterilization system. Another home, they don't have any water, so they need to have water transported to their home, or maybe they need a new well, or maybe they need, some type of, portable tank that they can make it more efficient in their pickup truck. And so it's a lot of challenges that come with, that water ministry.
Wow, that's just amazing though what you do. And I guess the repairing, I think you don't really think of that because a lot of people probably drill it and forget it, so to speak, right? They feel like they did their job and they've moved on, but just like everything else, it wear and tear breaks it down, and somebody's got to be able to come in and get it back going. And that's huge. And I think what you're doing is absolutely just amazing. And I remember listening to you talking about it on the way back, and I was just completely blown away because I had no idea the level of how bad it was comparatively to all the other things that's going on in the world. Especially I didn't realize it was so severe locally in some areas of where we live. It's just something you just don't think about. Like I said, you take things for granted, right? You have the luxuries of a nice home and water and stuff like that, and some people just don't have that.
Right.
So anyway, so how can people get involved to help to assist with that? Where can people go?
Sure. Well, our website probably will be the easiest. Run for Water. It's run the number 4, runforwater.net is the website. And then I will throw out a little plug that I guess it's still right now. It's still kind of as a underneath the main organization, Run for Water. We have 84days.net. When my first trip to Africa, so I was able to take my oldest daughter with me. And of course, I'm looking at things from the perspective of water. She's looking at the perspective of a 14-year-old teenage girl. And the burden of collecting water in Africa generally falls on, young schoolgirls. One thing she realized is that in talking to some of these young teenage girls is that their biggest need was they didn't have proper feminine hygiene products. So once a month, they would miss school whenever they're, on their period. And so she came back just totally driven to try to solve that world problem and shared that with some of the girls at the school that I teach with. And they created an organization called 84 Days. 84 Days is the number of days that a girl will miss from school if she doesn't have proper feminine hygiene. And so that's been a phenomenal ministry in the sense that we partner with local Ugandan young women that we've sent to self-defense training, and they've been checked out on how to teach girls, on a lot of these areas. We partner with them and go into the school and we'll provide a kit. We call it the 84 days kit, where it has reusable pads and a menstrual cup. And, and our ladies talk to these young girls about sanitation and about their body. And because a lot of those things there are very taboo and just are not talked about. And so that's another aspect of our ministries, trying to empower girls to stay in school and give them those feminine hygiene products so that they can stay in school.
That's amazing. And that's huge. Again, it's something that, that a lot of people wouldn't think about, right? I mean, it's just not something that, I think a lot of times we take things for granted, and we don't realize how good we have it until you hear of stories like this, and you hear of the struggles that other folks have. And I think that, what you guys are doing is just phenomenal. And I'll make sure to link both of your sites onto my page in there, so that people can easily click on that and go to those sites and assist if they if they want to. But it's just amazing. And I think this is probably just a great place to wrap it up. This has been a great conversation. I knew it would be. I was really excited to be able to talk to you about about some of your adventures and some of the great things that you've accomplished running, and then listen to some of the great things you do off the trail and off the road, because what you do for these communities are just, you and the group of people that you take out there to do these things are just phenomenal, and it's just wonderful. So thank you for your time today, Greg. I really appreciate it. It's always. I remember when I started doing these YouTube videos, you're one of the first people that came to my mind, and I was like, I've got to figure out when I want to talk to him, and I'm just very appreciative of you taking the time to do this. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Jason. It's been an honor to be with you.
All right. Well, I appreciate it, guys. This is it for tonight. And as always, if you could give my channel a subscribe and give this video a like, that would be great. Any support would be appreciative. And that is it. And I will see you on the trail. Thank you again, Greg. I appreciate it.
Thank you.